A small vase of crabapple blossom makes a wonderful subject for a drawing. So how in particular can we do a quick gestural drawing of something that really has in many ways so much detail? And how can we capture the overblown, drooping, really though still quite delicate effect of the leaves and the blossoms in a drawing where speed is going to be one of the things we're trying to achieve, as well as a nice drawing? Let me show you and explain in the next 10 minutes. I think one of the most important things with a quick gestural drawing is to keep all of our line work looking the same, with the same level of speed, of gesturalness, if you like. And one of the, I think, the challenges is not to have our first lines look like they've been drawn too slowly, too carefully in relation to, say, the lines in the second half of the drawing, when it becomes easier to kind of speed things up anyway. So I'm wanting to make sure these first lines are really nice and loose. So I'm actually holding my pen very loosely and a bit further back from the end, which I find always encourages me to keep my line work loose and brisk. And I'm also taking care not to get bogged down in the detail of the petals. These apple blossom flowers, crabapple blossom flowers in fact, are very full of petal, and I need to avoid the temptation to go into too much detail, which, as you know, is always a challenge for me. I do like to go into detail and to see the precision, but I'm deliberately keeping my drawing loose. I'm just trying to get a sense of what direction does the blossom face, and how does it cone out from the center? Where's the actual center, and how is it catching the light? How is the shadow forming? Because I want to be able to replicate the shade and the shadow with some very equally fast hatching when I've got the line work done. This drawing took me 20-23 minutes to do in real time, of which probably 2/3 was this line work, and then 1/3 was the actual hatching line work. So I think the one thing I could have done with this more was just perhaps a little more alignment with where various components are, especially now since I've drawn enough of the bunch of flowers, vase of flowers, to actually reference for the parts that I'm drawing now. I feel like my overall shape of this spray of crabapple blossom isn't quite as accurate to the reference, but maybe it's because I was subconsciously thinking, well, it doesn't need to be quite as exact as, say, a building's perspective. And I am trying to keep my lines loose. I'm not getting too hung up with if the petals and the flowers and the blossoms and the stems don't exactly align the same way they do in the reference. This is a great subject for a very quick gestural drawing for that way. But as you can see, I'm still keeping my apple blossom flowers nice and loose, but getting a sense of the overall form and the direction and the outside versus the inside, and thinking about, as I draw them, how am I going to shade them, making sure that I've got, if you like, the structure that I'll need to put the hatching, cross-hatching lines on. And the vase is quite a tricky vase. It's a bit of a free form vase, probably from the 1930s is my guess. And I don't want to get too involved with the vase because I do want this to be about the flowers. So it just gets a little more complicated over here on the right hand side, I felt, or maybe I was just starting to lose my gesturalness and become a little more precise in my drawing. I don't know. But I certainly probably start to get a little bit too slow in my drawing. I feel like I took as long to do the final third as I did to do the first 2/3. Or possibly just because there is more branching here that we can see. It wasn't just so much a cluster of blossoms, but I'm still trying to keep everything nice and loose and certainly keep my line work looking the same as what it was. But you can see just the fact that I've drawn these lines a bit more slowly as I've thought about them more, how they just end up being darker than those first blossoms that I drew, which do look a bit lighter. So the way we apply our lines does affect the visual appearance of our drawing. afterwards. So I actually added an extra blossom down here because I felt like it just needed it for balance, just to pull it down a bit more in that corner so it looked a little more even. And now I start the hatching. So I do a couple of kind of darker bits just to get me going, but equally I'm not going to do the darkest hatching just yet, and I'll certainly keep this first hatching fairly light. Now you'll see that what I'm doing right from the start is I'm really taking each blossom as a separate unit, but basically as a whole unit. I'm not getting hung up hatching between petals and the shade of individual petals, except in a very few spots. Generally I'm taking the whole flower as one thing to shade in the one way. And certainly at this stage I will later go back to some blossoms and add a little more hatching just to darken the shade effect in a part of it, but certainly not at this stage. At this stage I'm really wanting to establish where my darkest darks will be, and then I can start to spread my mid-tones a little more. Now clearly my darkest darks are going to be between some of the blossoms where the leaves are in shade, deeper shade, or are being shadowed by other parts of the small bouquet. So I want to establish some of those, and I do want to maintain some areas of high contrast. So I do want to make sure there are some very dark hatching areas next to some very light or basically unhatched areas as well, because these will be the forms that help show what's happening. And I particularly want to have a few blossoms that are fairly well silhouetted by darkness, just to make clear these are flowers, these are blossom flowers. They're massed together in a vase in a bit of a helter-skelter jumble, and I think with a quick gestural drawing where the line work isn't as precise as we would possibly otherwise have, we do want to give the observer a few clues to make it easier for them to realize straight away, oh yes, this is blossoms, and a nice silhouette of light against dark, such as where I was drawing just then, is a great way to help that happen nice and quickly. And yet I do want to avoid too many mid-tones. I do want some of my blossoms to become relatively dark. If we were to desaturate this reference photo into black and white, some of the greys of the flowers would be darker than some of the greys of the leaves. So there is a bit of tonal variation in the flowers that we also want to capture. But generally, overall, the leaves and the vase are the darkest spots, and we want to show that too. So we need to make these, if you like, big picture decisions and then seek to apply them to our reference. We have to remove in a very quick gestural drawing a lot of the nuance of light and dark and line, and if you like, generalize things, because it is such a quick and frantic affair. So this is sped up a bit more, just a little bit more than double time. So I really was drawing very quickly. At the end of this I will show some real-time video of both drawing the outline and drawing the hatching if you'd like to see what it was like real time. And can I suggest you do watch that too, just get a sense of how fast I was drawing. So when I talk about a quick gestural drawing, this is what I'm talking about. And I hadn't really thought about the vase, which is sort of a highly reflective glass surface, and I didn't want to spin out my time by doing it super carefully, and I also didn't want it to draw the eye too much away from the flowers. I really just particularly wanted it to be a nice dark contrast to what I've drawn above, darker even than the leaves, to visually anchor onto the surface, the whole thing, and also to provide a bit more silhouette edge to those lowest blossoms. And I almost forgot to put the shadow on the table, and just look at the difference that it makes without drawing anything else at all. Suddenly this is a three-dimensional object sitting on a surface when I do a few horizontal lines to represent shadow. So I'm getting pretty close now, and at the last minute I was just looking overall at the whole thing to see what do I need to darken? And I felt the lower left section needed a bit more hatching over the flowers, and I did that. I'm not sure if I do any more or if I finish with this hatching. But I'm really now almost squinting my eyes to look overall at the tonal values of this vase of flowers as a single object, if you like, and making some adjustments there. And I realized I'd underdone a little bit up in this top corner and hadn't put those darker tones in. So at this stage though, it's almost done. I'm just doing some of these, if you like, fine-tuning things, but these are often the things that can really make the details snap by just getting a few more of these really strong tonal contrasts, very light and dark next to each other. And pretty much we have it. What do you think? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. This was a lot of fun. If you'd like to have a go drawing this yourself, I'll post this crabapple blossom reference photo onto my community page. So why not set yourself a 23-minute target and see how you go, capturing the lovely overblown and ruffled and drooping feel of these crabapple blossoms with a quick gestural line and hatching drawing. Well, coming up is a couple of real-time drawing minutes of this, but whatever you're drawing and however you're drawing it, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.